Want to make sure that it is doing. Oh, this is not. Okay, so now it's doing what I needed to do. Got the Dodge on. Like I was saying, glad to be with y'all this week. I look forward to continue reading The Alchemist. Uh-oh. Hope I ain't messing nothing up. I complete one more task, family. And then we can get started. So again, family, glad to be back with y'all this week. Let me make sure. Okay, perfect. Perfect. Just had to make sure it was working like I needed to. Yo, if you've been with me for a minute, you know sound can be a premium at times. As we have some interesting events as it relates to sound. For real, for real. It's been lit. But where I want to start? I think I want to start with I pulled a little card today, and thinking of what our spiritual direction for the day, and I wanted to share that with you all. So I pulled this card. Called Remembering. I know who I am. Let me set this table up so I can do my thing. Yeah. So what did I do? So these cards are based on Mary Magdalene and her book of the Bible, which you have to do a little research to get, because the current Bible that we have most access to does not have all 2,200 books of the Bible. So a lot of people had thoughts and ideas and gifts, but it says this peace is not exclusive or reserved to only the most holy or ordained. This peace that Christ speaks of. So, in chapter 4 of Mary's Gospel, Christ says, as he greets everyone gathered around him, "Peace be with you. Acquire my peace. Acquire my peace. within yourself. So the peace is not exclusive or reserved to the most holy or ordained. This purple light is cute, but I can't see. This peace that Christ speaks of is a state of being that each of us can acquire within ourselves. Every time we can find the strength and the courage to remember who we are, we know again the peace that is always ours to claim within. So there's peace in knowing who you are and remembering who you are, because it takes remembering the truth of who we are in the midst of the worst possible circumstances. When someone is screaming at us, when we're feeling tremendous loss, or when we deeply held beliefs about ourselves are being shattered. Like when we find out that the mess that we deal with in life is a reflection of who we are. We are the energy that is reflected back to us. And it shatters some of the ideas of who we think we are. All it takes is remembering the other half of what it means to be human, right in the midst of the most difficult realities of what being human demands. The path of ancient Christians were practice of amnesis or living remembrance. It's a practice of trying not perfectly, but consistently. So you won't be perfect with this, but in those difficult moments, remind yourself who you are, that you are human experiencing this, and you are connected to the divine. And that can help build a sense of peace within you. All right, we're going to hit this bowl. Take your deep breaths, because you know we're going to do our breathing exercise next as well. I ain't even gonna lie to you, I love the bowl. It gets so loud. You can feel like when I'm doing it, I can feel the vibrations. At least, I mean, I feel it all the way through my body, but just alone and consciously, it's up to my elbow. And I love that for me. So we're going to do our breathing exercises, and we are going to return back to our root. Yeah. I think I want to do 2-4. We're going to do 2-4-2. So we're going to breathe in through our nose and out through our mouths. On my count of three, we breathe in, hold it for 2 seconds, then breathe out. Repeat it. Breathe in, hold it for 4, breathe out. And last time, breathe in, hold it for 2, breathe out. On my count of three, 1, 2, 3. Breathe in, hold it for 2 seconds. 1, 2, breathe out. One more time for 4 seconds. My count of three, we breathe in, then breathe out. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in, hold it for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out. Last time, my count of three. Breathe in, hold it for 2 seconds. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in, hold it for 2 seconds. 1, 2. Breathe out. There was a time when I was meditating and doing some personal visualizations, and my mind took me to a place where it looks as though I want you to visualize this place as I'm describing it to you. It looks as though the world that we are in is made of glass. The planets, the stars, the buildings, including us, are made of glass. So I want you to visualize yourself made of glass and think about what that glass represents, how fragile that glass is, how you protect the glass. You remember the surface tension and the density of that glass, because it is a glass that, although it is fragile, it is a glass that is enduring and can withstand many, many, many different storms. So as you visualize yourself and the world around you as glass, I want you to take some time and look down at yourself. And as you look at yourself, I want you to see what is growing and happening beneath that glass that is you. I want you to visualize different worlds, different places, different people, different systems functioning differently. Your nervous system. Think about all these things. Visualize trees and people, life and buildings. And as you visualize that, I want you to step back and visualize yourself and your glass turning into the shape of the earth. And as you transform into a new space of matter, I want you to start thinking about how important your role is to ensure that those life forms that have developed inside of you can survive. Think about who you have to be to make sure that the worlds that are developing inside of you can sustain. Think about the changes, the transformations, the redefining of who we are and reconnecting to who we were in our role in protecting the world that developed inside of us. Now, as you think of that, I want you to repeat after me with these affirmations of your role. I am safe and secure. I am grounded and centered. I am self-sufficient. I am financially secure. I love being in my body. I am safe and secure. I am grounded and centered. I am self-sufficient. I am financially secure. I love being in my body. All right. So last week we learned about the personal legend. And I'm terrible with the names, so I'm terrible with names in real life. So I'm definitely about to be terrible with names on this book, right? But whatever. But I think the main character is about to take a journey to Egypt to chase his fortunes untold. But I think the question for the night, which we're going to start including, is what is your personal legend? So in the book, the personal legend is who you wanted to be prior to the fractures in your timeline that changed your direction. Right? So I remember I told Tuesday Night Family that my personal legend was to be a hammer dancer. I wanted to be one of straight up one of MC Hammer's dancers, and I wanted to marry Whitney Houston. Needless to say, I ain't gonna be a hammer dancer, and I'm not marrying Whitney Houston. But aside from that, the thing that I really wanted to do, most of all, is be in a position to change the lives of myself and others. And as wild as it is in my life, in some aspects, I did chase my personal legend. But the personal legend that I was chasing in my career did not sit right with the personal legend of my life. There was a huge disconnect. And as I said before, who I needed to be in that space was not in alignment with who I wanted to be for myself. So we made a pivot. Life forced somewhat of a pivot, and it leads us here where we together as a family are doing our role to help others and to remind ourselves of how great we really are, right? So I'm glad you could be here. Think about your personal legend. We'll have a different conversation after we read this part. So hold on. Okay, so here we go. Okay, I think we read this part. We did. We didn't get to no spoon though. Cool. We'll start here anyway. Before the boy could reply, a butterfly appeared and fluttered between him and the old man. He remembered something his grandfather had once told him, that butterflies were a good omen. Like crickets and like grasshoppers, like lizards and four-leaf clovers. Man, you don't even understand. I used to have lizards that just, oh my God, they needed to pay rent the way they used to come in my face. That's right, said the old man, able to read the boy's thoughts. Just as your grandfather taught you, these are good omens. The old man opened his cape. I'm hearing sound, so excuse me. And it sound like text. But the old man opened his cape, and the boy was struck by what he saw. The old man wore a breastplate of heavy gold covered with precious stones. The boy recalled the brilliance and had noticed on the previous day. He really was a king. He must be disguised to avoid the encounters with thieves. Take these, said the old man, holding out a white stone and a black stone that had been embedded at the center of his breastplate. They're called Urim and Thummim. The black signifies yes, and the white no. When you're unable to read the omens, they will help you do so. Always ask an objective question. But if you can, try to make your own decisions. The treasure is at the pyramids that you already knew. But I had to insist on a payment of 6 sheep because I helped you to make your decision. The boy put the stones in his pouch. From then on, he would make his own decisions. Don't forget that everything you deal with is only one thing and nothing else. And don't forget the language of omens. And above all, don't forget to follow your personal legend through to its conclusion. But before I go, I want to tell you a little story. A certain shopkeeper sent his son to learn about the secret of happiness from the wisest man in the world. The lad wandered through the desert for 40 days and finally came upon a beautiful castle high atop a mountain. It was there that the wise man lived. Rather than finally a saintly man, though our hero, on entering the main room of the castle, saw a hive of activity. Tradesmen came and went. People were conversing in the corners. A small orchestra was playing soft music, and there was a table covered with platters of the most delicious food in the world, in that part of the world. The wise man conversed with everyone, and the boy had to wait 2 hours before it was his turn to be given the man's attention. The wise man listened attentively to the boy's explanation of why he had come, but told him he didn't have time just then to explain the secrets of happiness. He suggested that the boy look around the place and return in 2 hours. Meanwhile, I want to ask you to do something, said the wise man, handing the boy a teaspoon that held 2 drops of oil. As you wander around, carry the spoon with you without allowing the oil to spill. The boy began climbing and descending the many stairways of the palace, keeping his eyes fixed on the spoon. After 2 hours, he returned to the room where the wise man was. Well, asked the wise man, did you see the Persian tapestries that are hanging in my dining hall? Did you see the gardener? That it took the master gardener 10 years to create? Did you notice the beautiful parchments in my library? The boy was embarrassed and confessed that he had observed nothing. His only concern had been not to spill the oil that the wise man had entrusted to him. Then go back and observe the marvels of my world, said the wise man. You cannot trust a man if you don't know his house. Interesting. Relieved, the boy picked up the spoon and returned to his exploration of the palace, this time observing all the works of arts on the ceilings and the walls. He saw the gardens, the mountains all around him, the beauty of the flowers, and the taste with which everything had been selected. Upon returning to the wise man, he related in detail everything he had seen. But where are the drops of oil I entrusted you? Asked the wise man. Looking down at a spoon he held, the boy saw that the oil was gone. Well, there is only one piece of advice I can give you, said the wisest of wise men. The secret of happiness is to see all the marvels of the world and never to forget the drops of oil on the spoon. I know that's right. Yeah, a lot of us get lost in that. The shepherd said nothing. He had understood the story the old king had told him. A shepherd may like to travel, but he should never forget about his sheep. The old man looked at the boy and, with his hands held together, made several strange gestures over the boy's head. Then, taking his sheep, he walked away. At the highest point of Tarifa, there's an old fort built by the Moors. From atop its walls, one can catch a glimpse of Africa. Melchizedek, the king of Salem, sat on the wall of that fort that afternoon and felt the lavender blowing in his face. The lavender, not lavender, lavender, which is supposed to be the winds that blew the Moors in. The sheep fidgeted nearby, uneasy with their new owner and excited by so much change. All they wanted was food and water. Melchizedek watched a small ship that was plowing its way out the fort. He would never again see the boy, just as he had never seen Abraham again after having charged him with 1/10 fee. That was his work. The gods should not have desires because they don't have personal legends. But the king of Salem hoped desperately that the boy would be successful. It's too bad that he's quickly gone to forget my name, he thought. I should have repeated it for him. Then when he spoke about me, he would say that I am Melchizedek, the king of Salem. He looked to the skies, feeling a bit abashed, and said, I know, it's the vanity of vanities, as you said, my lord, but an old king sometime has to take some pride in himself, right? Oh, man, God damn it. How strange Africa is, thought the boy. He was sitting at a bar very much like other bars he had seen along the narrow streets of Tangier. Some men were smoking from a gigantic pipe that they passed from one another. In just a few hours, he had seen men walking hand in hand, women with their faces covered, and priests that climbed to the top of towers and chanted, as everyone about him went to their knees and placed their foreheads on the ground. A practice of infidels, he said to himself. As a child in the church, he had always looked at the image of Saint Santiago Matamoros, on his white horse, his sword unsheathed, and figures such as these kneeling at his feet. The boy felt ill and terribly alone. The infidels had an evil look about them. Besides this, in the rush of his travels, he had forgotten a detail, just one detail, which could keep him from his treasure for a long time. Only Arabic was spoken in this country. The owner of the bar approached him, and the boy pointed to a drink that had been reserved at the next table. It turned out to be bitter tea. The boy preferred wine. But he didn't need to worry about that right now. What he had to be concerned about was his treasure and how he was going about getting it. The sale of his sheep had left him with enough money in his pouch, and the boy knew that in money there was magic. Whoever has money is never really alone. Before long, maybe in just a few days, he would be at the pyramids. An old man with a breastplate of gold wouldn't have lied just to acquire 6 sheep. The old man had spoken about signs and omens, and as the boy was crossing the strait, he had thought about omens. Yes, the old man had known what he was talking about. During the time the boy had spent in the fields of Andalusia, he had become used to learning which path he should take by observing the ground and the sky. He had discovered that the presence of a certain bird meant that a snake was nearby, and that a certain shrub was a sign that there was water in the area. The sheep had taught him that. If God leads the sheep so well, he will also lead a man, he thought, and that made him feel better. The tea seemed less bitter. Who are you? He heard a voice ask him in Spanish. The boy was relieved. He was thinking about omens and someone had appeared. How come you speak Spanish? He asked. The new arrival was a young man in Western dress, but the color of his skin suggested that he was from the city. He was about the same age and height as the boy. Almost everyone here speaks Spanish. We're only 2 hours from Spain. Sit down and let me treat you to something, said the boy, and asked for a glass of wine. I hate this tea. There is no wine in this country, the young man said. The religion forbids it. The boy told him then that he needed to get to the pyramids. He almost began to tell about his treasure, but decided not to do so. If he did, it was possible that the Arab would want part of it as payment for taking him there. He remembered what the old man said about offering something you didn't even have yet. I'd like to take you there. I'd like you to take me there if you can. I can pay you if you serve as my guide. Do you have any idea how to get there? The newcomer asked. The boy noticed that the owner of the bar stood nearby, listening attentively to their conversation. He felt uneasy at the man's presence, but he had found a guide and didn't want to miss out on an opportunity. You have to cross the entire Sahara Desert, said the young man, and to do that, you need money. I need to know whether you have enough. The boy thought it was a strange question, but he trusted in the old man who had said that when you really want something, the universe always conspires in your favor. He took his money from his pouch and showed it to the young man. The owner of the bar came over and looked as well. The two men exchanged some words in Arabic, and the owner of the bar seemed irritated. Let's get out of here, said the new arrival. He wants us to leave. The boy was relieved. He got up to pay the bill, but the owner grabbed him and began to speak at him in an angry stream of words. The boy was strong, and he wanted to retaliate, but he was in a foreign country. His new friend pushed the owner aside and pulled the boy outside with him. He wanted your money, he said. Tangier is not like the rest of Africa. This is a port, and every port has its thieves. The boy trusted his new friend. He had helped him out of a dangerous situation. He took out his money and counted it. We could get to the pyramids by tomorrow, said the own said the what? Said the other, taking the money. But I have to buy 2 camels. They walked together through the narrow streets of Tangier. Everywhere there were stalls with items for sale. They reached the center of a large plaza where the market was held. There were thousands of people there arguing, selling, and buying. Vegetables for sale amongst daggers and carpets displayed alongside tobacco. The boy never took his eyes off his new friend. After all, he had all his money. He thought about asking him to give it back, but decided that would be unfriendly. He knew nothing about the customs of the strange land he was in. I'll just watch him, he said to himself. He knew he was stronger than his friend. Suddenly, there in the midst of all that confusion, he saw the most beautiful sword he had ever seen. The scabbard was embossed in silver, and the handle was black and encrusted with precious stones. The boy promised himself that when he returned from Egypt, he would buy that sword. Ask the owner of that stall how much the sword cost. He said to his friends. Then he realized that he had been distracted for a few moments, looking at the sword. His heart squeezed as if his chest had suddenly compressed it. He was afraid to look around because he knew what he would find. He continued to look at that beautiful sword for a bit longer until he summoned the courage to look around. All around him in the market with people coming and going, shouting and buying, and the aroma of strange foods, but nowhere could he find his new companion. The boy wanted to believe that his friend had simply become separated from him by accident. He decided to stay right there and await his return. As he waited, a priest climbed to the top of a nearby tower and began his chant. Everyone in the market fell to their knees and touched their forehead to the ground and took up the chant. Then, like a colony of worker ants, they dismantled their stalls and left. The sun began to depart as well. The boy watched it through its trajectory for some time until it was hidden behind the white houses surrounding the plaza. He recalled that when the sun had risen that morning, he was on the other continent, still a shepherd with 60 sheep and looking forward to meeting with the girl. That morning, he had known everything that was going to happen to him as he walked through the familiar fields. But now, as the sun began to set, he was in a different country, a stranger in a strange land where he couldn't even speak the language. He was no longer a shepherd, and he had nothing, not even money to return and start everything over. All this happened between sunrise and sunset, the boy thought. He was feeling sorry for himself and lamenting the fact that his life could have changed so suddenly and so drastically. He was so ashamed that he wanted to cry. He had never even wept in front of his own sheep, but the marketplace was empty and he was far from home, so he wept. He wept because God was unfair and because this was the way God repaid those who believed in their dreams. When I had my sheep, I was happy, and I made those around me happy. People saw me coming and welcomed me, he thought. But now I'm sad and alone. I'm going I'm going to become bitter and distrustful of people because one person betrayed me. I'm going to hate those who have found their treasure because I never found mine. And I'm going to hold on to what little I have because I'm too insignificant to conquer the world. He opened his pouch to see what was left of his possessions. Maybe there was a bit left of the sandwich he had eaten on the ship, but all he found was the heavy book, his jacket, and the 2 stones the old man had given him. As he looked at the stones, he felt relieved for some reason. He had exchanged 66 sheep for 2 precious stones that had been taken from a gold breastplate. He could sell the stones and buy a return ticket. But this time, I'll be smarter, the boy thought, removing them from the pouch so he can put them in his pocket. This was a port town, and the only truthful thing his friend had told him was port towns are full of thieves. Interesting. Now he understood why the owner of the bar had been upset. He was trying to tell him not to trust that man. I'm like everyone else. I see the world in terms of what I would like to see happen, not what actually does. He ran his finger slowly over the stones, sensing their temperature and feeling their surface. They were his treasure. Just handling them made him feel better. They reminded him of the old man. When you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it, he said. The boy was trying to understand the truth of what the old man said. There he was in an empty marketplace, without a cent to his name, and with not a sheep to guard through the night. But the stones were proof that he had met with the king, a king who knew of the boy's past. They're called Urim and Thummim, and they can help you read the omens. The boy put the stones back in the pouch and decided to do an experiment. The old man said to ask very clear questions, and to do that, the boy had to know what he wanted. So he asked if the old man's blessings was still with him. He took out one of the stones. It was yes. Am I going to find my treasure? He asked. He stuck his hand in his pouch, felt around for one of the stones. As he did so, both of them pushed through a hole in the pouch and fell to the ground. The boy had never even noticed that there was a hole in his pouch. He knelt down to find the Urim and Thummim and put them back in the pouch. But as he saw them lying on the ground, another phrase came to his mind. Learn to recognize omens and follow them, the old king had said. An omen? The boy smiled to himself. He picked up 2 stones and put them back in his pouch. He didn't consider mending the hole. The stones could fall through any time they wanted. He had learned that there were certain things one shouldn't ask about so as not to flee from one's own personal legend. I promised that I would make my own decisions, he said to himself. But the stones had told him that the old man was still with him, and that made him feel more confident. He looked around at the empty plaza again, feeling less desperate than before. This wasn't a strange place. It was a new one. After all, what he had always wanted was just that, to know new places. Even if he never got to the pyramids, he had already traveled further than any shepherd he knew. Oh, and if they only knew how different things are just 2 hours by ship from where they are, he thought. Although his new world at the moment was just an empty marketplace, he had already seen it when it was teeming with life, and he would never forget it. He remembered the sword. It hurt him a bit to think about it, but he had never seen one like it before. As he mused about the things, he realized that he had chosen between thinking of himself as a poor victim of a thief and as an adventurer in quest of his treasure. I'm an adventurer looking for treasure. That's crazy. It's simple as a change of perspective. You can go from a victim to a hero. He was shaken into wakefulness by someone. He had fallen asleep in the middle of the marketplace, and life in the plaza was about to resume. Looking around, he sought his sheep and then realized that he was in a new world. But instead of being saddened, he was happy. He no longer had to seek out food and water for his sheep. He can go in search of his treasure instead. He had not a cent in his pocket, but he had faith. He had decided the night before that he would be as much an adventurer as the ones he had admired in books. He walked slowly through the marketplace. The merchants were assembling their stalls, and the boy helped the candy seller to do his. The candy seller had a smile on his face. He was happy, aware of what his life was about, and ready to begin a day's work. His smile reminded the boy of the old man, the mysterious king he had met. This candy merchant isn't making candy so that later he can travel or marry a shopkeeper's daughter. He's doing it because it's what he wants to do, thought the boy. He realized that he can do the same thing the old man had done, sense whether a person was near to or far from their personal legend just by looking at them. It's easy, and yet I never done it before, he thought. When the stall was assembled, the candy seller offered the boy the first sweet he had made for the day. The boy thanked him, ate it, and went on his way. When he had gone only a short distance, he realized that while they were erecting the stall, one of them had spoken in Arabic and the other in Spanish, and they understood each other perfectly well. There must be a language that doesn't depend on words, the boy thought. I've already had that experience with my sheep, and now it's happening with people. Definitely is. Body language, and you definitely can. Thoughts are energy. Can't be created or destroyed. They can only be transferred. I know me and my homeboys just look at each other, have whole conversations in a room full of people without saying one word. I remember, oh my God. The universal language of the universal language of body language. I remember, oh, never mind, I'm not even gonna tell that story. Uh, he was learning a lot of new things. Some of them were things that he had already experienced and weren't really new, but that he had never perceived before. And he hadn't perceived them because he had become accustomed to them. He realized, if I can learn to understand this language without words, I can learn to understand the world. Relaxed and unhurried, he resolved that he would walk through the narrow streets of Tangier. Only in that way would he be able to read the omens. He knew it would require a lot of patience, but shepherds know all about patience. Once again, he saw that in a strange land, he was applying the same lesson he had learned with his sheep. All things are one, the old man said. The crystal merchant awoke with the day and felt the same anxiety that he felt every morning. He had been in the same place for 30 years, a shop at the top of a hilly street where few customers passed. Now it was too late to change anything. The only thing he had ever learned to do was to buy and sell crystal glassware. There had been a time when many people knew of his shop. Arab merchants, French and English geologists, German soldiers who were always well heeled. What? In those days, it had been wonderful to be selling crystal, and he had thought how he would become rich and have beautiful women at his side as he grew older. But as time passed, Tangier changed. The nearby city of Sueda had grown faster than Tangier, and the business had fallen off. Neighbors moved away, and there remained only a few small shops on the hill, and no one was going to climb the hill just to browse through a few small shops. But the crystal merchant had no choice. He had lived 30 years of his life buying and selling crystal pieces, and now was too late to do anything else. He spent the entire morning observing the infrequent coming and goings in the street. He had done this for years, and he knew the schedule of everyone who passed. But just before lunch, a boy stopped in front of the shop. He was dressed normally, but the practiced eyes of the crystal merchant could see that the boy had no money to spend. Nevertheless, the merchant decided to delay his lunch for a few minutes until the boy moved on. My allergies acting up. A card hanging in the doorway announced that several languages were spoken in the shop. The boy saw a man appear behind the counter. I can clean up those glasses in the window if you want, said the boy. The way they look now, nobody's going to want to buy them. The man looked at him without responding. In exchange, you can give me something to eat. The man still said nothing. The boy sensed that he was going to have to make a decision. In his pouch, he had his jacket. He certainly wasn't going to need it in the desert. Taking the jacket out, he began to clean the glasses. In half an hour, he had cleaned all the glasses in the window. And as he was doing so, two customers had entered the shop and bought some crystal. When he had completed the cleaning, he asked the man for something to eat. Let's go have some lunch, said the crystal merchant. He put a sign on the door, and they went to a small cafe nearby. As they sat down at the table in the place, the crystal merchant laughed. You didn't have to do any cleaning, he said. The Quran requires me to feed a hungry person. Well then, why did you let me do it? The boy asked. Because the crystal was dirty, and both you and I needed to cleanse our minds of negative thoughts. When they had eaten, the merchant turned to the boy and said, I'd like you to work in my shop. Two customers came in today while you were working, and that's a good omen. People talk a lot about omens, thought the shepherd, but they really don't know what they're saying. Just as I hadn't realized that for so many years, I had been speaking a language without words to my sheep. Do you want to go to work for me? The merchant asked. I can work for the rest of the day, the boy answered. I'll work all night until dawn, and I'll clean every piece of crystal in your shop. In return, I need money to get to Egypt tomorrow. The merchant laughed. Even if you cleaned my crystal for an entire year, even if you earned a good commission selling every piece, you would still have to borrow money to get to Egypt. There are thousands of kilometers of the desert between here and there. There was a moment of silence so profound that it seemed that the city was asleep. No sound from the bazaars, no arguments amongst the merchants, no men climbing the towers to chant. No hope, no adventure, no old kings or personal legends, no treasure, and no pyramids. It was as if the world had fallen silent because the boy's soul had. He sat there, staring blankly through the door of the cafe, wishing that he had died and that everything would end forever at this moment. The merchant looked anxiously at the boy. All the joy he had seen that morning had suddenly disappeared. I can give you the money you need to get back to your country, my son, said the crystal merchant. The boy said nothing. He got up, adjusted his clothing, and picked up his pouch. I'll work for you, he said. And after another long silence, he added, I need money to buy sheep. So dude about to give up on his personal legend. Which I get. Because, man, you be hitting the bumps in the road, and you start thinking about responsibilities that you got elsewhere, life get crazy. But I tell you, if you give up on you, ain't nobody else gonna do it. So, yeah, part 2. KOS. Okay, we got a little time. All right. The boy had been working for the crystal merchant for almost a month, and he can see that it wasn't exactly the kind of job that would make him happy. The merchant spent the entire day mumbling behind the counter, telling the boy to be careful with the pieces and not to break anything. But he stayed with the job because the merchant, although he was an old grouch, treated him fairly. The boy received a good commission for each piece he sold, and he had already been able to put some money to the side. That morning, he had done some calculating. If he continued to work every day as he had been, he would need a whole year to be able to buy some sheep. I'd like to build a display case for the crystal, the boy said to the merchant. We could place it outside and attract those people who pass the bottom of the hill. I've never had one before, said the merchant, answered. People will pass by and bump into it, and pieces will be broken. Well, when I took my sheep through the fields, some of them might have died if we had come upon a snake. But that's the way of life is with sheep and with shepherds. The merchant turned to a customer who wanted to see 3 crystal glasses. He was selling better than ever, as if time had turned back to the old days when the street had been one of Tanger's major attractions. Business has really improved, he said to the boy after the customer left. I'm doing much better, and soon you'll be able to return to your sheep. Why ask more out of life? Because we have to respond to the omens. The boy said, almost without meaning to. Then he regretted what he had said because the merchant had never met the king. It's called the principle of favorability, beginner's luck, because life wants you to achieve your personal legend, the old king had said. But the merchant understood what the boy said. The boy's very presence in the shop was an omen, and as time passed and money was pouring into the cash drawers, he had no regret about having hired the boy. The boy was being paid more money than he deserved because the merchant, thinking that sales wouldn't amount to much, had offered the boy a high commission rate. He had assumed that he would soon return to his sheep. Why do you want to get to the pyramids? He asked, to get away from the business of the display. Because I've always heard about them, the boy answered, saying nothing about his dream. The treasure was now nothing but a painful memory, and he had tried to avoid thinking about it. I don't know how anyone around here who would want to cross the desert just to see the pyramids, said the merchant. They're just a pile of stones. You could build one in your backyard. You never had dreams of travel, said the boy, turning to wait on a customer who had entered the shop. 2 days later, the merchant spoke to the boy about the display. I don't much like change, he said. You and I aren't like Hassan, the rich merchant. He makes buying mistakes. It doesn't affect him much. But we too have to live with our mistakes. That's true enough, the boy thought ruefully. Why do you think we should have the display? I want to get back to my sheep faster. We have to take an advantage when luck is on our side and do as much to help it as it's doing to help us. It's called the principle of favorability or beginner's luck. The merchant was silent for a few moments. Then he said, the prophet gave us the Quran and left us just 5 obligations to satisfy during our life. The most important is to believe only in the one true God. The others are to pray 5 times a day, fast during Ramadan, and be charitable to the poor. He stopped there, his eyes filled with tears as he spoke of the prophet. He was a devout man, and even with all his impatience, he wanted to live his life in accordance with Muslim law. What's the 5th obligation? The boy asked. 2 days ago, you said that I had never dreamed of travel, the merchant answered. The 5th obligation of every Muslim is a pilgrimage. We are obliged at least once in our lifetime to visit the holy city of Mecca. Mecca is a lot further away than the pyramids. When I was young, All I wanted to do was put together enough money to start this shop. I thought that someday I'd be rich and could go to Mecca. I began to make some money, but I could never bring myself to leave someone in charge of the shop. The crystals are delicate things. He was so focused on the oil that he was missing the opportunity to see the beauty of the world. I began to make some money, but I could never bring myself to leave someone in charge of the shop. The crystals are delicate things. At the same time, people were passing my shop all the time heading for Mecca. Some of them were rich pilgrims traveling in caravans with servants and camels, but most of the people making the pilgrimage were poorer than I. All who went there were happy at having done so. They placed symbols of the pilgrimage on the doors of their houses. One of them, a cobbler who made his living mending boots, said that he had traveled for almost a year through the desert, but he had got more tired when he had to walk through the streets of Tangier buying his leather. Well, why don't you go to Mecca now? Asked the boy. Because it's the thought of Mecca that keeps me alive. That's what helps me face these days that are all the same. These mute crystals on the shelves, and lunch and dinner at the same horrible cafe. I'm afraid that if my dream is realized, I'll have no reason to go on living. That's a real fear. I think a lot of people have a fear of success. Your dream about the sheep and the pyramids, you dream about your sheep and the pyramids, but you're different from me because you want to realize your dreams. I just want to dream about Mecca. I've already imagined a thousand times crossing the desert, arriving at the plaza of the sacred stone, the 7 times I walk around it before allowing myself to touch it. I've already imagined the people who would be by my side and those in front of me, and the conversations and prayers we would share. But I'm afraid that if it would all what? But I'm afraid that it would all be disappointment. So I prefer to just dream about it. That day, the merchant gave the boy permission to build the display. Not everyone could see his dreams come true in the same way. I know that's right. 2 more months. I still like the way the gypsy told him. She was like, if I knew how to bring, she was like, I know how to read dreams. But if I knew how to bring dreams to life, I wouldn't be sitting here. So this is a process of bringing your dreams to life. 2 more months had passed, and the chef brought many customers into the crystal shop. The boy estimated that if he worked for 6 more months, he could return to Spain and buy 60 sheep and yet another 60. In less than a year, he would have doubled his flock, and he would be able to do business with the Arabs because he was now able to speak their strange language. Since that morning in the marketplace, he had never again made use of the Urim and the Thummim because Egypt was now just a distant dream for him, as was Mecca for the merchant. Anyway, the boy had become happy in his work and thought all the time about the day when he would disembark for Tarifa as a winner. You must always know what it is that you want, the old king said. The boy knew and was now working towards it. Maybe it was his treasure to have wound up in a strange land, meet up with a thief, and double the size of his flock without spending a cent. He was proud of himself. He had learned some important things, like how to deal in crystal, and about the language without words, and about omens. One afternoon, he had seen a man at the top of the hill complaining that it was impossible to find a decent place to get something to drink after such a climb. The boy, accustomed to recognizing omens, spoke to the merchant. Let's sell tea to the people who climb the hill. Lots of places sell tea around here, the merchant said, but we could sell tea in crystal glasses. The people will enjoy the tea and want to buy the glass. I have been told that beauty is the seducer of men. The merchant didn't respond, but that afternoon, After saying his prayers and closing the shop, he invited the boy to sit with him and share his hookah, that strange pipe used by the Arabs. Huh. Okay, I'll read a little bit more. What is it that you're looking for? Asked the old merchant. I've already told you. I need to buy my sheep back, so I have to earn the money to do so. The merchant put some new coals on the hookah and inhaled deeply. I've had this shop for 30 years. I know good crystal from bad and everything else there is to know about crystal. I know its dimensions and how it behaves. If we serve tea in crystal, the shop is going to expand. And then I'll have to change my way of life. Well, isn't that good? I'm already used to the way things are. Before you came, I was thinking about how much time I had wasted in the same place while my friends had moved on and either went bankrupt or did better than they ever had before. It made me very depressed. Now I can see that it hasn't been too bad. The shop is exactly the size I always wanted it to be. I don't want it to change anything because I don't know how to deal with change. I'm used to the way I am. A lot of us struggle with change, and the idea of changing ourselves can be so frightening. That man is scared to death, and he's leaning on the boy's knowledge to give him the confidence he needs to not be so afraid. The boy didn't know what to say. The old man continued, You have been a real blessing to me. Today, I understand something I didn't see before. Every blessing ignored becomes a curse. I know that's right. I don't want anything else in life, but you are forcing me to look at wealth and at horizons I have never known. Now that I have seen them, and now that I see how immense my possibilities are, I'm going to feel worse than I did before you arrived because I know the things I should be able to accomplish and don't want to do so. I know that's right. It's good. I refrain from saying anything to the baker in Tarifa, thought the boy to himself. They went on smoking the pipe for a while as the sun began to set. They were conversing in Arabic, and the boy was proud of himself for being able to do so. There had been a time when he thought that his sheep could teach him everything he needed to know about the world, but then he could never, but they could have never taught him Arabic. There are probably other things in the world that the sheep can't teach me, thought the boy as he regarded the old merchant. All they ever really do is look for food and water, and maybe it wasn't that they were teaching me, but I was learning from them. Maktub, the merchant said finally. What does that mean? You would have to have been born an Arab to understand, he answered. But in your language, it would be something like it is written. And as he smothered the coals in the hookah, he told that boy he could begin to sell tea in the crystal glasses. Sometimes there's just no way to hold back the river. I know that's right. Sometimes it's not. I'll read probably two more sections. The men climbed the hill and they were tired when they reached the top. But there they saw a crystal shop that offered refreshing mint tea. They went in to drink the tea, which was served in beautiful crystal glasses. My wife never thought of this, said one, and he bought some crystal. He was entertaining guests that night, and the guests would be impressed by the beauty of his glassware. The other man remarked that the tea was always more delicious when it was served in crystal because the aroma was retained. The third said that it was a tradition of the Orient to use crystal glasses for tea because it had magical powers. Before long, the news spread, and great many people began to climb the hill to see the shop that was doing something new in a trade that was so old. Other shops were open, open that served tea and crystal, but they weren't at the top of the hill, and they had little business. Eventually, the merchant had to hire 2 more employees. He began to import enormous quantities of tea along with his crystal, and his shop was sought out by men and women with thirst for new things. And in that way, the months passed. I'll read this last section. It's like 5 paragraphs. The boy awoke before dawn. It had been 11 months and 9 days since he first set foot on the African continent. He dressed in his Arabian clothing of white linen, bought especially for this day. He put his headcloth in place and secured it with a ring made of camel skin. Wearing his new sandals, he descended the stairs silently. The city was still sleeping. He prepared himself a sandwich and drank some hot tea from a crystal glass. Then he sat in the sun-filled doorway, smoking the hookah. He smoked in silence, thinking of nothing and listening to the sound of the wind that brought the scent of the desert. When he finished his smoke, he reached into one of his pockets and sat there for a few moments, regarding what he had withdrawn. It was a bundle of money, enough to buy himself 120 sheep, a returning ticket, and a license to import products from Africa into his own country. He waited patiently for the merchant to awaken and open the shop. Then the two went off to have some more tea. I'm leaving today, said the boy. I have the money I need to buy my sheep, and you have the money you need to go to Mecca. The old man said nothing. Will you give me your blessing? Asked the boy. You have helped me. The man continued to prepare his tea, saying nothing. Then he turned to the boy. I am proud of you, he said. You brought a new feeling into my crystal shop. But you know that I'm not going to Mecca, just as you know you're not going to buy your sheep. Who told you that? Asked the boy, startled. Maktab, said the old crystal merchant, and he gave the boy his blessing. Yeah, we'll start there. Boo, boo, boo. All right. So that was a interesting part. That man right. That boy is not going back to buy no sheep. He gonna go see them pyramids, guaranteed. But it definitely is a good testament on how we get stuck in our own routines and how we can box our dreams into tiny boxes and force them to stay in tiny boxes when the energy is there for us to expand. Right? So, family, I appreciate you as always. You know, we're about to wrap this up. The music might be playing now. I forgot I could do all that. Woo, 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 woo. But I appreciate you. And I see you Tuesday. I think we're moving into suggestion. The power of suggestion and reprogramming and programming our mind. And this question on some of my pages, probably on this. What is your personal legend? So I'll make a post and we'll think about it. And yeah. So I'll see you Tuesday or next Thursday, family. And you can catch me sometime on the weekend. If you like streaming games, whenever I decide to play my Xbox, I just go live. So you can probably catch me on a Sunday, streaming games. So whatever you like. But again, family, I appreciate you. You know I'm about to walk off and cut this thing off. So thank ya.